My wife convinced me to sign everything, then locked me out of my own life. I trusted my wife when she asked me to transfer assets for tax reasons. Weeks later, I was locked out of our accounts, home, and even my business. I uncover a hidden affair and a planned divorce trap. I fight back legally and emotionally, reclaiming stability. The night I realized I didn't own my own life anymore, I was standing barefoot on the cold concrete of my driveway, staring at a locked front door that no longer recognized me. The porch light hummed faintly, that tired yellow buzz it always made when the bulb was on its last legs. My breath fogged the air, though it wasn't that cold, just one of those damp evenings where the chill seeps up from the ground instead of falling from the sky. I kept pressing the garage keypad, slower each time, as if patience might suddenly teach it to remember me. Invalid code. I tried the front door key next. It slid in smoothly, turned halfway, and stopped dead. For a moment, I laughed. A thin, hollow sound escaped me, like air leaking from a tire. I thought maybe I was tired, maybe my hands were numb. I pulled the key out, looked at it under the porch light, like it might have changed shape when I wasn't looking. Same key, same scratches on the brass, the one I'd carried for 12 years. I tried again. Nothing. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A message. Please don't come inside tonight. We need space. I'll explain later. Lena. Space. The word felt like a slap when you were locked out of your own house. I leaned my forehead against the door, breathing in the faint smell of old paint and warm wood. Inside, somewhere beyond that door, were my couch cushions molded to my shape, my coffee mug with the chipped handle, the small dent in the hallway wall from when we'd moved the dresser in too fast. Inside was the life I thought I understood, and suddenly I wasn't welcome in it. Before all of this, my life was ordinary, in the best way. I'm not someone who ever chased big drama or sharp edges. I liked routines, predictable mornings, the quiet comfort of knowing where things belonged. Lena and I met in our late 20s at a mutual friend's barbecue. She had worn a faded blue dress and smelled faintly of sunscreen and grilled corn. She laughed easily, not loud, but warm, the kind of laugh that invited you in instead of drawing attention to itself. I remember thinking she felt safe, solid, like someone you could build a life with instead of just passing time. We built exactly that. Our house sat on a modest corner lot, maple tree in the front yard, wind chimes on the porch that sang softly when the breeze came in off the fields. On Saturday mornings, I'd make coffee strong enough to wake the dead, while Lena flipped pancakes, humming off-key to whatever song was stuck in her head that week. Syrup always dripped onto the counter because she poured too fast. I always wiped it up without saying anything. It wasn't perfect, no marriage ever is, but it was steady, comfortable, the kind of love that feels more like a deep-rooted tree than fireworks. I ran a small logistics consulting business from a rented office downtown. Nothing flashy, but stable. Lena handled marketing for a local real estate firm and worked partly from home. Evenings were usually leftovers, a show we'd already seen twice, her feet tucked under my leg on the couch. Sometimes we talked about trips we'd take someday. Sometimes we just sat in companionable silence, listening to the dishwasher hum. I trusted her the way you trust gravity without thinking about it. So when she first mentioned the paperwork, I didn't feel alarm, just mild confusion. It's nothing dramatic, she said one night, rinsing dishes while I dried them. Water splashed softly against ceramic. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon soap. My coworker's husband is a CPA. He mentioned we could save a decent amount in taxes if we restructure some of our assets. I raised an eyebrow. Restructure how? Just transferring a few things into my name for now. Temporary. It simplifies some filings. She shrugged lightly, casual, as if she were talking about changing phone plans. We can switch it back anytime. The word temporary floated in the warm kitchen air. I wasn't financially illiterate, but taxes had always bored me. Numbers blurred together, forms piled up. Lena, on the other hand, was organized. Color-coded folders, reminder alerts. She enjoyed handling logistics. I was grateful for it. Are you sure? I asked. She turned toward me, dish towel draped over her shoulder, eyes soft. Of course. I wouldn't suggest it if it wasn't safe. Trust me. That last part came with a small smile, half playful, half earnest. Trust me. I kissed her cheek. Yeah, I trust you. you. The next few weeks were filled with quiet paperwork moments. Signing here, initial there. She'd slide documents across the dining table, neatly stacked, post-it notes pointing the signature lines. The paper smelled faintly of toner and dust. I'd skim the headers, recognize familiar terms: house deed, business account authorization, vehicle registration, and sign. It didn't feel dramatic. It felt administrative, adult, boring. Sometimes she'd squeeze my hand afterward and say, "Thank you for being easy about this." I'd laugh. That's my brand. There were small changes I didn't notice at first because life rarely announces its turning points. She started taking her phone into the bathroom more often. Her notifications went silent. She worked later than usual, sometimes eating dinner alone at her desk upstairs. When I asked how her day was, her answers became shorter, less textured, less detail about coworkers, fewer funny little stories. I chalked it up to stress. Everyone goes through busy seasons. Everyone gets tired. One night, I noticed she'd changed the password on our shared streaming account. It logged me out mid-episode. I called upstairs jokingly. "Hey, did you lock me out of my own TV?" She laughed faintly. "Oh, sorry. Security update. I'll send it to you later." She didn't. I didn't push. Trust makes you generous with explanations, but sometimes generosity becomes blindness. A week later, I tried to transfer money from our joint account to pay a vendor invoice for my business. The banking app froze, then displayed a message I'd never seen before. "Access denied. Please contact account holder." I stared at the screen longer than necessary, thumb hovering as if the words might rearrange themselves. Account holder. I told myself it was probably a glitch. I told myself a lot of things back then. That night on the driveway, locked out of my own home, phone buzzing cold in my hand, those small moments replayed themselves like quiet warnings I'd ignored. The wind chimes tapped gently in the breeze above me, soft metallic whispers that sounded almost like a question. How had I handed my entire life away without noticing? I slid down onto the concrete step, back against the door, staring out at the dark street where our porch light barely reached. Somewhere inside, Lena was moving around. I could hear faint footsteps through the door, familiar sounds, a familiar house that no longer belonged to me. My chest felt tight, not with anger yet, just confusion, disbelief, a slow creeping fear that something much larger was unfolding beyond my understanding. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and waited, listening to the night, trying to make sense of the quiet collapse of everything I thought was stable. This couldn't be the whole story. It never is. I didn't sleep that night. I ended up in my car, reclined awkwardly in the driver's seat, jacket folded under my head like a thin pillow. The air inside smelled faintly of old coffee and leather cleaner. Every time a headlight passed down the street, the shadows shifted across the dashboard, making the inside of the car feel like it was breathing. My phone stayed face up on my chest, screen dark, waiting. No message came. Around 4 in the morning, the sky softened from black to charcoal. Birds started testing their voices in the trees. I felt hollow in that strange way exhaustion creates, like my body was present, but my thoughts were drifting somewhere just outside of me. When the sun finally pushed its pale light over the rooftops, I tried the door again, still locked. I knocked this time, gently at first, then firmer. The sound echoed dull and heavy against the wood. "Lena?" My voice sounded strange in the quiet morning air. "Can you open the door?" Footsteps approached. I heard the chain slide. The door opened, just a crack. Her face appeared in the gap, pale, eyes tired, hair pulled into a loose knot. She looked like she hadn't slept either. "We shouldn't talk right now," she said softly. "I slept in the car," I replied. Not accusing, just stating a fact. "Can I come inside?" She hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the door edge. "Please?" I added. "I don't understand what's happening." A long pause. Then the chain slid free. She stepped aside, letting me in. The house smelled like stale coffee and the faint citrus of the floor cleaner she liked. Everything looked the same. Shoes by the door, the framed photo of us at the lake crooked on the wall. And yet it felt like I was walking into someone else's space. We sat at opposite ends of the kitchen table. Sunlight slanted through the blinds, striping the surface between us like quiet barriers. "You scared me last night," I said. Her lips pressed together. "I needed time." "For what?" She rubbed her hands together slowly, as if warming them. "To think." A familiar tightness formed in my chest. "About what, Lena?" She met my eyes then, something guarded flickering behind them. "About us." The word landed heavier than it should have. "Okay," I said carefully. "Think away." "But locking me out of the house? Of the accounts? That's not thinking, that's something else." Her gaze dropped to the table. "I didn't lock you out of the accounts. I couldn't access our joint funds yesterday." She inhaled slowly. "I changed some permissions. Temporarily." The same word again. "Why?" I asked. She hesitated. "Because things are complicated right now." That wasn't an answer. It was fog. I leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking under my weight. "You asked me to sign a lot of paperwork lately, yes?" Yes? You told me it was for taxes. It is, she said quickly, too quickly. My stomach tightened. Then why does it feel like I just signed my name out of my own life? Silence filled the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a car passed, tires whispering against pavement. I need space, she said again. Quieter this time, just for a little while. Space from me, I said, or space from the truth? Her eyes flashed, then softened. You're tired. You're reading too much into this. That sentence, so gentle on the surface, felt like a door closing. I wanted to push harder, demand answers, shake the truth loose. Instead, I nodded slowly. Fine, I said, but we're talking about this soon. She gave a small nod, already distant. I showered, changed, and left for work with a knot in my stomach that refused to loosen. At the office, my assistant Carla greeted me with her usual smile. Morning. Coffee's fresh? Thanks, I said, forcing my face into something neutral. I logged into my business account to review invoices. The screen stalled. Then a notification popped up. User privileges limited. Contact administrator. My fingers froze over the keyboard. I tried another system. Same result. I called the bank. After 20 minutes of hold music and robotic menus, a polite voice finally answered. I'm sorry, sir, the representative said after verifying my identity. You're no longer listed as a primary account holder on this account. My throat went dry. What? There was a change submitted 3 weeks ago. Signed authorization transferring full control to your spouse. I gripped the edge of the desk. That's not possible. This is my business account. It was authorized properly, she said gently. I can't reverse it without the primary holder's consent or a court order. The call ended. The office felt too quiet, too bright. 3 weeks ago. Paperwork. Temporary. My pulse thudded in my ears. I walked into Carla's office. I'm stepping out for a bit. If anyone calls, take a message. She looked concerned. Everything okay? I managed a thin smile. Just paperwork chaos. Outside, the air smelled like rain and exhaust. I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel, hands trembling slightly. This wasn't a glitch. This was deliberate. I drove to the county records office on instinct, like a man chasing a shadow. The waiting area smelled of old carpet and printer ink. A tired clerk pulled up property records from my address. Owner, Lena H. Sole title holder. My name wasn't there. The house, the business accounts, the vehicles, everything I thought we shared had quietly shifted into her name, piece by piece, signature by signature. I sat there staring at the screen, a dull roaring filling my ears. Memories flooded in, her calm smile across the table, the gentle way she slid documents toward me, the softness in her voice when she said, "Trust me." I drove home in a fog. Her car was gone. The house sat silent, blinds drawn. I unlocked the door. She must have re-enabled my key and walked inside slowly. The quiet felt heavy, unnatural. I wandered through the rooms like a guest in my own life. In the bedroom, her laptop sat closed on the dresser. I hesitated. I had never gone through her things. Privacy had always been sacred between us. Even now, part of me resisted crossing that line. But another part, the part that had slept in a car, locked out of his own finances, needed answers. I opened the laptop. It didn't require a password. My chest tightened. Her email was already open. At first, I saw normal things. Work messages, promotions, calendar invites. Then a subject line caught my eye. Miss you already? My fingers hovered over the trackpad. I clicked. The message thread unfolded like a slow-motion collapse. Inside jokes I didn't recognize. Weekend plans that didn't include me. Compliments that made my stomach twist. Photos, not explicit, but intimate enough to leave no doubt. A man named Evan. One message dated 2 months back made my breath catch. Once the transfers are finalized, it'll be easier. We can start fresh without complications. My vision blurred. Transfers. Start fresh without complications. I sat heavily on the edge of the bed, the room tilting slightly, heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. Every small change, every subtle shift, every gentle reassurance snapped into place like a terrible puzzle finally solved. This wasn't about taxes. This was about erasing me. I don't remember how long I sat there on the edge of the bed with her laptop open in front of me. Time lost its usual shape. Minutes stretched and collapsed. My heart kept pounding in uneven rhythms, like it couldn't decide whether to run or freeze. The room smelled faintly of her lavender lotion, the same scent that used to cling to my pillow at night. Now it felt foreign, intrusive. I scrolled further back through the messages, against my better judgment. Each swipe felt felt like dragging a blade slowly across something already raw. Evan was charming in that polished, confident way. Well-written sentences, easy humor, a steady stream of affirmation. He called her brilliant, brave, deserving of more. He talked about new beginnings and clean breaks like life was a spreadsheet you could simply reorganize. And Lena, she sounded like someone I'd barely recognized. More daring, more restless, less patient. She vented about feeling boxed in, about carrying the weight of responsibility, about wanting something that felt exciting again. She never painted me as cruel, just predictable, safe, comfortable, ordinary. The most dangerous kind of insult, because it sounds harmless until it cuts deep. One message from last week made my hands tremble. He signed the last documents today. He doesn't suspect anything. I feel terrible sometimes, but this is the only way we can protect ourselves. Protect ourselves. From me? I closed the laptop gently, like the sound might shatter what little stability I had left. My mouth tasted metallic. I realized I'd been holding my breath. I walked into the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. My reflection stared back at me, eyes bloodshot, jaw tight, a faint crease between my eyebrows I didn't remember earning.
I looked older in that mirror, smaller. The man in the reflection had trusted too easily. I sat on the couch afterward, staring at the blank television screen. My thoughts moved in slow, heavy circles. Anger came in waves, hot and sharp, but underneath it was something quieter and more devastating. Grief. Grief for the version of my life I thought was real. Grief for the woman I believed I knew. Grief for the trust I had handed over without hesitation. When Lena came home that evening, I was waiting at the kitchen table. The sun had already dipped low, painting the walls with soft orange light. I hadn't turned on any lamps. I wanted her to see my face clearly. She froze when she saw me sitting there. "You're home early?" she said carefully, setting her bag down. "We need to talk." Her shoulders tensed. She didn't sit. "Can this wait? I'm exhausted." "No." The firmness in my voice surprised even me. She studied me for a moment, then slowly pulled out the chair across from me and sat, her hands folded neatly in front of her, fingers intertwined. I slid the laptop toward her. Her eyes dropped to it. Recognition flickered and vanished. "You went through my computer?" she asked quietly. "I read your emails," I replied. With Evan, silence expanded between us like a held breath. Her jaw tightened. A faint color rose in her cheeks. "How long?" she asked. "How long have you been planning to take everything and disappear?" I countered. She exhaled slowly, eyes closing for a brief moment. When she opened them again, there was no denial in them. "I didn't plan to disappear," she said. "I planned to leave. With my house, my business, my accounts. I didn't steal anything," she replied. "You signed the documents. Because you lied to me." Her voice sharpened. "I simplified things. You never questioned anything. That's called trust," I said. My voice cracked despite my effort to keep it steady. "That's called marriage." She looked away, lips pressed thin. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said finally, "but I couldn't stay trapped in a life that didn't feel like mine anymore." "Trapped?" I echoed. "You built this life with me, and people change," she snapped. I felt invisible, unseen, like I was just maintaining a routine instead of living. "So you decided to erase me?" Her eyes filled with something complicated. Guilt, defensiveness, maybe even a trace of regret. "I needed security when I left," she said quietly. "I couldn't start over with nothing. So you took everything," I replied. She didn't answer. The silence was thick and heavy, pressing against my ears. "Who is he?" I asked. She hesitated. "Someone who sees me." The words landed like a quiet fracture inside my chest. I stood up slowly. My legs felt weak, but my resolve hardened with each breath. "You locked me out of my own home," I said. "You removed my access to my livelihood. You planned this for months while looking me in the eye every day." Her voice trembled slightly. "I didn't think you'd find out so fast." That admission hurt more than any insult. "I'm calling a lawyer tomorrow," I said. "This ends now." Her face tightened. "You can't undo what's already done." "We'll see." I walked past her toward the bedroom. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To pack a bag," I replied. "I'm not sleeping under the same roof tonight." She didn't stop me. That night, I stayed at a small motel near the highway. The room smelled faintly of detergent and stale air. The mattress sagged in the middle. Traffic murmured through the thin walls like distant ocean waves. I lay awake staring
at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our marriage with a new lens, searching for missed signs, hidden cracks, quiet shifts I had dismissed. By morning, the sadness gave way to something steadier, resolve. I called a family law attorney as soon as their office opened. A calm woman named Marissa scheduled me for an emergency consultation that afternoon. Her office smelled of coffee and old books. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, dust motes drifting lazily in the air. After hearing my story, she leaned back slightly, fingers steepled. "What your wife did is legally questionable," she said carefully. "Especially if deception can be proven. We may be able to challenge the transfers." "May?" I asked. She met my eyes. "It won't be fast. It won't be cheap. But you're not powerless." Powerless. The word echoed in my mind as something I refused to accept. We began gathering documentation, copies of emails, account histories, timestamps, signatures. Each piece felt like reclaiming a small fragment of myself. I left her office feeling exhausted but grounded. For the first time in days, the fog lifted slightly. I wasn't broken. I was wounded and awake, and I wasn't going to quietly disappear from my own life. The legal process didn't arrive like a thunderstorm. It came like slow weather, steady pressure, small shifts, paperwork stacking quietly like snowfall you only notice once the ground is already covered. Marissa moved efficiently. Subpoenas were filed, financial records were requested, temporary restraining orders were drafted to prevent further asset movement. I learned new phrases I'd never wanted to know: fiduciary breach, marital misrepresentation, injunctive relief. Each term carried weight. Each document felt like a thin layer of protection rebuilding around the parts of my life that had been quietly dismantled. Lena didn't speak to me directly anymore. Communication went through attorneys. Short, sterile emails replaced the years of shared jokes and casual check-ins. I moved into a small furnished apartment across town. It smelled faintly of fresh paint and unfamiliar detergent. The windows faced a parking lot instead of maple trees. At night, the distant glow of streetlights painted pale stripes across the walls. It wasn't home, but it was mine. Some nights, the silence felt like a wound reopening. Other nights, it felt like breathing again. One afternoon, Marissa called. "We've uncovered something important," she said. My stomach tightened. "What kind of important?" "The individual your wife has been communicating with, Evan. He has a financial interest tied to one of the accounts your business uses. It appears he was positioning himself to benefit from the transfers." I closed my eyes slowly. So this wasn't just emotional. "No," she said. "There's a strong argument for coordinated intent. Betrayal rarely travels alone." A week later, Lena and I faced each other in a small mediation room. Beige walls, a long table, neutral artwork meant to calm people who had already been broken open. She looked thinner, tired. Her confidence seemed dulled around the edges. For a moment, seeing her like that stirred a flicker of the woman I once loved. Then I remembered the emails, the locks, the silence. The mediator spoke gently, guiding conversation like someone navigating a fragile bridge. "I'm willing to reverse the property transfer," Lena said quietly. "We can split things fairly and move on." Marissa leaned forward. "Given the documented deception and potential third-party benefit, we'll be pursuing full restoration of my client's original ownership interests." Lena's eyes widened slightly. She glanced at me, searching for face for something. Mercy, maybe. I held her gaze steadily. "This wasn't a misunderstanding," I said calmly. "It was a plan." Her shoulders slumped. Negotiations stretched over weeks. There were tense calls, revisions, counter-offers. Some nights I sat on my couch staring at the blank wall, feeling emotionally wrung out, like a cloth twisted too tightly. But gradually, momentum shifted. Court orders restored my access to my business accounts. The title was placed under temporary joint control pending final judgment. Restrictions were placed preventing Lena from transferring or selling assets. Small victories, real ones. The first morning I logged into my business account and saw full access restored, I felt an unexpected wave of emotion swell behind my eyes. It wasn't triumph, it was relief, like finding solid ground after realizing you'd been standing on thin ice. At work, my team sensed something had changed, though I hadn't shared details. Carla brought me coffee one morning and said gently, "You look steadier lately." I smiled faintly. "I feel like myself again." Outside of the courtroom battles, something quieter was happening inside me. I began noticing the parts of myself I had neglected while living comfortably inside routine. The walks I used to take after dinner, the books I meant to read, the small creative projects I'd abandoned because they felt impractical. I started cooking for myself myself instead of relying on takeout. The smell of garlic sizzling in olive oil filled my apartment some evenings, grounding me in the present moment. I rearranged the furniture until the space felt intentional instead of temporary. Healing rarely announces itself loudly. It shows up in small choices. Then came the day everything surfaced publicly. A routine audit flagged irregularities connected to Evan's financial involvement. His firm launched an internal investigation. Whispers traveled faster than facts in professional circles. One afternoon, a colleague from an industry group called me. "Hey," he said carefully, "I heard some things about Lena's connection to that consultant your company almost partnered with. Just wanted to check in." The truth was moving without my help, not as revenge, as consequence. Lena's real estate firm placed her on administrative leave, pending review of ethical concerns tied to undisclosed conflicts of interest. The weight of her choices was no longer private. When I heard, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt sadness. Sadness for the way a once shared life had fractured so completely. Sadness for the woman who had convinced herself deception was protection. Sadness for both of us. Our final court session came quietly. The judge reviewed documentation, testimonies, timelines. The ruling restored my ownership stake in the business fully and mandated equitable division of remaining marital assets based on original contributions. The house would be sold, proceeds split fairly. No one walked away with everything, as it should be. Outside the courthouse, the air was crisp, sunlight bright against the stone steps. Lena stood a few feet away, waiting for her ride. For a moment, we looked at each other. Two people who once shared grocery lists and lazy Sundays, now bound only by memory. "I'm sorry," she said softly. I studied her face, searching for sincerity. I found it, imperfect, delayed, but real enough. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I replied honestly. She nodded, then turned away. I watched her leave, feeling a quiet chapter closing inside me. That evening, I sat on my apartment balcony as dusk settled in. The sky shifted from gold to indigo. Somewhere below, a neighbor played soft music through an open window. The scent of someone's dinner drifted upward. Onions, maybe, or peppers. I breathed deeply. For the first time in months, my body didn't feel braced for impact. I wasn't whole yet, but I was free. Life didn't snap back into place after the court ruling. There was no triumphant music, no sudden sense of completion. Healing, I learned, moves more like a tide than a switch. Slow, sometimes retreating before it advances again. The house sold in early spring. I walked through it one last time before the closing. Empty rooms echoing with soft footsteps. Without furniture, every sound lingered longer than it should have. The walls held faint outlines where pictures once hung. Lighter patches where sunlight had been blocked for years. I paused in the kitchen, running my hand along the counter's edge. I could almost hear the old rhythms, the hiss of pancakes, the clink of mugs, Lena humming off key. The memories didn't sting as sharply anymore. They felt like photographs instead of open wounds. Outside, the maple tree had just begun to bud, life continuing, quietly indifferent to human heartbreak. I locked the door for the last time and left the keys with the agent. The chapter closed with a soft click instead of a slam. I moved into a slightly larger apartment closer to my office. Sunlight poured through the wide windows in the mornings, warming the hardwood floors until they glowed faintly honey-colored. I bought a simple wooden dining table instead of eating off the counter. I hung a few framed prints I'd always liked but never prioritized. The space slowly became mine. Some evenings, I invited a friend over for dinner. We talked about ordinary things, work frustrations, bad movies, new restaurants. It felt good to laugh without the weight of explanations hanging in the air. Other nights, I sat alone with a book or soft music, learning to enjoy solitude instead of fearing it. One afternoon, while sorting through old paperwork, I came across a scanned copy of one of the documents I had signed months earlier. My signature sat at the bottom, steady, confident, unaware. I stared at it for a long moment. I didn't feel anger this time. I felt clarity. Trust is not blindness, I realized. Trust deserves attention, presence, questions. It thrives on honesty from both sides and dies quietly when one person stops telling the truth. I began sharing my experience selectively, not as a warning wrapped in bitterness, but as a reminder to stay awake inside our own lives. Friends listened with wide eyes, some shaken, some thoughtful. A few admitted they'd never really looked closely at their own financial partnerships. It wasn't about paranoia. It was about awareness. Work stabilized again. Clients returned. Projects regained momentum. The steady rhythm of problem-solving and planning grounded me in a way that felt familiar and reassuring. One morning, Carla stopped by my office doorway holding 2 coffees. "Extra fuel," she said with a smile. I accepted the cup. "You're spoiling me." She shrugged. "You've been through a lot." Her simple acknowledgement warmed something inside me. Not pity, just human recognition. Spring turned into summer. I started taking evening walks again. Slow loops through the neighborhood as the sky softened into pastel hues. Kids rode bikes in loose circles. Dogs tugged eagerly at leashes. Someone grilled in a nearby yard, the smell of charcoal drifting lazily through the air. Ordinary life, quietly miraculous. One evening, I ran into Lena unexpectedly at a grocery store. We stood in the produce aisle, both reaching for the same bag of oranges before pulling back awkwardly. "Hi," she said. "Hi." She looked different, not dramatically, just subtly. Shorter hair, a quieter energy, less guarded somehow. "How have you been?" she asked. "Good," I replied honestly. "Busy? Steady?" She nodded. I moved closer to my sister. "Starting over. I hope it's going well." There was a pause, not uncomfortable, just reflective. "I made choices I regret," she said softly. I believed her. "I've learned from them," I replied. We exchanged a small mutual smile, not forgiveness wrapped in ceremony, but peace, grounded in acceptance. We went our separate ways, carts rolling in opposite directions. I didn't look back. That night, sitting on my balcony with a warm cup of tea, I watched the last light fade from the sky. The city hummed gently below. A breeze carried the faint scent of blooming jasmine from somewhere nearby. I thought about how easily comfort can disguise complacency, how love requires not just affection, but attention, how strength sometimes reveals itself only after something breaks. I wasn't grateful for the betrayal, but I was grateful for the clarity it forced into my life, for the boundaries it taught me to protect, for the quiet resilience I didn't know I possessed. Most of all, I was grateful that I chose not to disappear inside someone else's decisions. I chose to stand up, to rebuild, to remain awake in my own story. If you're listening to this and something in your life feels quietly off, a subtle unease you keep dismissing, maybe this is your reminder to pause and look closer, to ask questions, to protect the life you're building. Because sometimes the most dangerous losses don't arrive with noise. They arrive wrapped in trust. Would you have questioned sooner or trusted the way I did? If this story resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might need the reminder. And if you'd like to hear more real-life stories about resilience, betrayal, and rebuilding, don't forget to subscribe and support the channel. You never know whose story might help you see your own more clearly.